On the morning of June 7, 1992, in Springfield, Missouri, 3 women, Cheryl Levitt, her daughter Susie Streeter, and Susie's friend Stacy McCall, vanished without a trace from Levitt's home. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, and no immediate clues suggesting where they had gone. Over 30 years later, the case of the Springfield 3 remains one of the most confounding unsolved disappearances in the United States, characterized by conflicting theories, unconfirmed leads, and a complete absence of physical evidence. The sequence of events leading up to the disappearance begins the night before. On June 6, 1992, Kickapoo High School held its graduation ceremony. Among the graduates were Susie Streeter, age 19, and her friend Stacy McCall, age 18. Both young women had spent the evening celebrating with friends, attending several graduation parties around town. Their plans were to spend the night at a friend's house, but later changed their minds when that house became overcrowded. They decided instead to stay at Susie's home, where Susie's mother, 47-year-old Cheryl Levitt, had spent the evening working as a hairdresser before returning home around 11:15 p.m. Phone records and witness statements indicate that the 2 girls arrived at the Levitt residence at approximately 2:15 a.m. They had intended to sleep for a few hours before meeting friends the next morning to visit a water park. It was, by all accounts, an ordinary summer night for 2 recent graduates, full of excitement and plans for the future. But by the next morning, all 3 women had vanished. When friends attempted to contact them, they received no response. Calls to the home phone went unanswered, and by midday, concerned friends began stopping by the house. What they found only deepened the mystery. Cheryl's car, a 1991 Corsica, was parked in the driveway. Both Susie's red Ford Escort and Stacy's Toyota Corolla were also there. Inside the house, the women's purses were neatly placed on the floor of the living room, and the keys, jewelry, and cigarettes they habitually carried were left behind. The beds appeared to have been slept in, and the home itself was in otherwise perfect order, with no indication of forced entry or struggle. One of the first friends to arrive, Janelle Kirby, later reported that the porch light outside the home was broken, with shattered glass scattered across the front steps. Thinking little at the time, she and her boyfriend swept it away to prevent injury, an act that, in retrospect, may have erased a crucial piece of evidence. Another notable detail emerged from the home's answering machine. Several messages had been received overnight, including one that was described as strange and disturbing. However, before police could listen to it, the message was accidentally erased. When Cheryl failed to show up for work and neither Susie nor Stacy made it to their planned outing, family members and police began to realize that something was seriously wrong. By the evening of June 7th, the missing persons report had been filed, and law enforcement began an investigation that would stretch on for decades. The initial response to the disappearance was complicated by the sheer absence of physical evidence. There was no sign of robbery, struggle, or forced entry. The front door was unlocked, and nothing inside the home appeared stolen or disturbed. Even more confounding was the fact that all 3 vehicles were still at the residence, along with the women's personal items. Investigators concluded early on that the women had not left voluntarily. The first 48 hours of the investigation were marked by heavy foot traffic through the home, as friends, family, and well-meaning neighbors entered before the area was secured as a potential crime scene. This likely contaminated or destroyed valuable evidence. Despite extensive searches of the surrounding area, including nearby woods, creeks, and abandoned properties, no trace of the 3 women was found. As the search expanded, investigators examined possible suspects and scenarios. One of the first theories involved a convicted kidnapper named Robert Craig Cox, who had been living in Springfield at the time. Cox had a history of violent crime, including the 1978 murder of a woman in Florida, and was considered a credible suspect due to his presence in the area and his later statements about knowing what had happened to the women. In the late 1990s, while serving a prison sentence in Texas, Cox told journalists that he knew the Springfield 3 were dead and that their bodies would never be recovered. He refused, however, to provide details or evidence, claiming that revealing more would compromise the person responsible. Investigators interviewed him several times, but were unable to corroborate his claims. Cox was never charged in connection with the case. Another line of inquiry focused on potential abduction by multiple perpetrators. The lack of forced entry led some investigators to believe that the women may have willingly opened the door, perhaps to someone they knew or trusted. Given that Cheryl and Susie were mother and daughter, it was theorized that the initial target might have been one of them, with the others becoming unintended victims. However, without concrete evidence, this remains speculation. In the years following the disappearance, numerous reported sightings surfaced across several states, including alleged appearances of the women in Oklahoma and Florida. None of these reports were ever substantiated. One of the most notable tips came in 2002, when a retired crime reporter claimed to have received an anonymous letter suggesting that the women's bodies were buried beneath a parking structure at Cox Hospital in Springfield. Ground-penetrating radar conducted by a private investigator identified 3 anomalies consistent with possible graves beneath the concrete. However, city officials declined to authorize excavation at the site, citing the lack of conclusive evidence and the disruption such an operation would cause. The theory remains untested. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the case became a focal point of public fascination. The image of the 3 women, smiling in their photographs, seemingly safe in the familiarity of their home, stood in stark contrast to the complete absence of answers. For many residents of Springfield, the case represented a loss of communal safety, altering the perception of the city from a quiet Midwestern town to a place haunted by unresolved tragedy. In 2017, the Springfield Police Department publicly reaffirmed that the case remains active. New leads continue to surface periodically, often following media coverage or anniversary dates. Advances in forensic science have allowed investigators to re-examine items from the home for potential DNA or trace evidence, though no breakthroughs have been announced. For the families involved, the emotional toll has been profound. Janice McCall, the mother of Stacy McCall, has remained one of the most vocal advocates for renewed attention to the case. In interviews, she has described the enduring uncertainty as a pain that remains, noting that even after decades, she continues to hold on to hope for resolution. The absence of any physical remains has left investigators without a foundation from which to confirm or deny theories. It also prevents formal closure for the families. As of today, all 3 women remain classified as missing persons. Among the unsolved questions are: who could have orchestrated the simultaneous disappearance of 3 individuals without leaving evidence of struggle? How could such an event occur in a residential neighborhood without witnesses? And why, despite advances in technology and renewed investigative efforts, has no trace of the women surfaced in more than 30 years? The Springfield 3 case is often cited in criminology and law enforcement discussions as an example of an evidence vacuum, a crime defined not by what was found, but by what was missing. It underscores the fragility of early investigative procedures, the importance of preserving crime scenes, and the challenge of pursuing justice when the trail runs cold before it even begins. Over time, the story has taken on a near-mythic quality within true crime circles, spawning documentaries, television segments, and ongoing speculation. Each retelling revisits the same elements: the unlocked door, the undisturbed home, the broken light, the erased message, as if somewhere within those details lies the key to understanding what really happened. Some retired detectives have suggested that the likeliest explanation involves abduction by a local individual who may have been familiar with the women's routines and confident enough to act swiftly and decisively. Others have proposed that more than one person may have been involved, possibly explaining how 3 individuals could have been subdued and removed without neighbors hearing anything. Despite years of inquiry, the Springfield Police Department has publicly stated that there is no single suspect or theory that fits all known facts. Every potential lead has either collapsed under scrutiny or led to another dead end. Nowadays, the house where the 3 women disappeared no longer stands. It was demolished years ago, yet the address remains etched in local memory, frequently cited as a site of unresolved sorrow. The Springfield 3 remain missing, and their case continues to represent one of the most enduring mysteries in American criminal history, a puzzle frozen in time, where evidence, motive, and opportunity all seem to have vanished alongside the victims themselves. In official reports, the investigation remains active, with both the Springfield Police Department and the FBI maintaining open case files. Periodic appeals to the public continue, and technological advances in DNA analysis and forensic databases offer some hope that a future discovery could yield answers long denied. 3 decades after that quiet June morning, the case persists as a haunting example of the limits of human understanding when confronted with total absence. There are no definitive conclusions, no recovered remains, and no confessions. We can only hope. In the early hours of February 14th, 2000, while most children were still asleep in anticipation of another school day, 9-year-old Asha Jakitagri quietly left her home in Shelby, North Carolina, and stepped out into the cold, rainy darkness. What happened in the hours that followed remains one of the most perplexing child disappearance cases in modern American history. Despite decades of investigation, no confirmed trace of Asha has ever been found, leaving both her family and investigators struggling to understand why a child with no history of trouble would vanish so mysteriously. Asha Degree was born on August 5, 1990, to Harold and Aquila Degree, who raised her and her older brother O'Brien in a close-knit, church-going household. The Degrees were known in their community as disciplined and protective parents who limited their children's exposure to television and computers, encouraging academic focus and participation in church and school activities. By all accounts, Asha was a happy, shy, and responsible child, an athlete and honor roll student who rarely gave her parents reason for concern. The day before her disappearance, Sunday, February 13th, began uneventfully. The family attended church, as they did every week, and then spent the afternoon visiting relatives. That evening, Asha and her brother went to bed around 8 p.m. in the room they shared. Heavy rain and strong winds swept through Shelby that night, leading to several power outages in the neighborhood. Harold Degree returned home from work around midnight and checked on both children, finding them asleep. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Harold again glanced into their room and saw both children still in bed. But sometime between that moment and 3:15 a.m., Asha quietly got up, dressed herself in jeans, a long-sleeved white t-shirt, and white sneakers, and left the house carrying her backpack. Her brother later told police that he heard her bed squeak during the night, but assumed she had simply shifted in her sleep. At about 3:45 a.m., motorists driving along Highway 18, a two-lane rural road about a mile from the Degrees' home, reported seeing a small figure walking along the roadside in the rain. One driver, recognizing how unusual it was for a child to be outside alone at that hour and in such weather, turned around to check on her. When he did, the girl ran off into the woods. That was the last confirmed sighting of Asha Degree. When the children's mother went to wake them at 6:30 a.m. for school, she found Asha's bed empty. Believing she might have gone to a relative's house, the family began calling neighbors and family members, but no one had seen her. Within hours, the Shelby Police Department was notified and a full-scale search began. Authorities immediately faced an unusual set of circumstances. There were no signs of forced entry or struggle in the home, suggesting that Asha had left voluntarily. Yet it seemed inconceivable that a 9-year-old would decide to walk away alone into the night, particularly in such weather and with no access to transportation or money. Local law enforcement quickly brought in tracking dog, helicopters, and ground search teams. Within 2 days, searchers found candy wrappers, a pencil, and a Mickey Mouse hairball that were identified as belonging to Asha, along with a marker bearing her name. These items were discovered near a shed along Highway 18, approximately 1.3 miles from her home, consistent with the direction of the early morning sightings. Investigators believed Asha may have taken shelter in that shed during the storm. The owner confirmed that some of the items had not been there before, but by the time searchers arrived, Asha was gone. Beyond those clues, the trail went cold. As days turned into weeks, the Degree family worked tirelessly to keep attention on the case. Flyers were distributed across the region, and the FBI soon joined the investigation. Despite hundreds of leads and reported sightings, none were verified. Early speculation ranged from the possibility of an abduction after Asha left home, to the theory that she may have been lured or influenced by someone she knew. However, there was no evidence of online communication. The family did not have home internet access, and no known relationship suggesting manipulation or grooming. 2 years later, in August 2001, a significant development occurred. during construction project along Highway 18 in Burke County. About 26 miles north of Shelby, workers uncovered a plastic bag that had been buried in the ground. Inside were a child's book bag and several items of clothing. The backpack was wrapped in 2 plastic trash bags and contained personal effects believed to belong to Asha. The discovery was sent to the FBI for analysis, but authorities have never publicly released details about the results, citing the ongoing nature of the case. The location of the buried bag deepened the mystery. The distance suggested that Asha may have either been transported by someone or traveled much farther than previously thought. The burial also indicated deliberate concealment, reinforcing suspicions of foul play. Yet, despite this potentially critical evidence, no arrests were made and no suspects were identified. Over the years, law enforcement has continued to pursue leads. In 2015, on the 15th anniversary of her disappearance, investigators revisited witness accounts and renewed public appeals. Among the new information released was a report that a possible witness had seen a girl matching Asha's description entering a dark green early 1970s Lincoln Continental or Ford Thunderbird near Highway 18 in the early morning hours of February 14th. However, despite this potential connection, no one associated with that vehicle has ever been located. The Degree family has remained deeply involved in the search, organizing annual walks, media campaigns, and prayer vigils to keep Asha's case in public view. Each year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, the community retraces a route she is believed to have taken that night. The family's continued advocacy reflects both their enduring hope and their frustration with the lack of progress. In 2020, the FBI and local authorities announced that they were re-examining physical evidence with modern forensic techniques. They also released images of 2 items believed to be linked to Asha, a Dr. Seuss book, McKelligott's Pool, and New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt, both reportedly found in her missing backpack. Neither item belonged to her family, raising further questions about how they came into her possession and what connections they might reveal. To date, no conclusive evidence has surfaced to explain why Asha left home or what happened after she was seen walking along the highway. Her family remains convinced that someone encountered her that night and played a role in her disappearance. Law enforcement agencies have treated the case as a potential abduction, though without a suspect or recovered remains. It remains officially classified as a missing person investigation. The disappearance of Asha Degree stands out not only for its mystery, but also for the unusual circumstances surrounding it. Most child disappearances involve either family members or strangers exploiting known vulnerabilities. Asha's case, by contrast, began with a seemingly voluntary departure by a child who had no apparent reason to run away. Investigators have repeatedly described the case as one of a kind in their experience, a scenario that defies traditional behavioral and criminological patterns. While technology and investigative methods have advanced since 2000, the absence of new leads has left the case frozen in uncertainty. The FBI maintains a VICAP listing for Asha, ensuring her information remains active in national databases and regularly revisited during reviews of unidentified remains or abduction patterns. In the early hours of March 31st, 2006, Brian Schaefer, a 27-year-old medical student at Ohio State University, entered a popular downtown bar in Columbus, Ohio, and was never seen leaving. His disappearance remains one of the most puzzling unsolved missing person cases in recent American history. Despite extensive investigations, including surveillance footage, witness accounts, and nationwide media attention, no trace of Schaefer has been found, and no explanation has been confirmed. Brian Thomas Schaefer was born on February 25, 1979, in Columbus, Ohio. By 2006, he was a third-year medical student at Ohio State University College of Medicine, known among friends and classmates as studious, polite, and reserved. He had been living in Columbus for several years and often socialized with friends on weekends, though he generally avoided alcohol and was described as responsible and cautious. On March 30th, 2006, Brian had spent the evening with classmates and friends, including Scott Wiley, at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a well-known bar on High Street in the campus area. Witnesses reported that the group arrived at the bar late in the evening. Brian was reportedly in good spirits, engaging in conversation with friends and acquaintances. According to those who saw him that night, he was not intoxicated. At approximately 1 a.m., Schaefer was captured on surveillance cameras entering the bar's front entrance. The footage, later released to the public, shows him walking in alone, appearing calm and composed. This recording is significant because it represents the last verified sighting of Brian Schaefer. According to bar staff, Brian remained inside for several hours. Around 1:30 a.m., he was seen speaking with friends at the bar, participating in conversations, and interacting with patrons. Around 2 a.m., he allegedly entered the restroom area. After that moment, there is no verified record of him leaving the premises. Investigators later reviewed surveillance footage from both the bar and surrounding establishments. Footage from outside the bar, including from adjacent restaurants and convenience stores, shows crowds exiting in the early hours of the morning, but Brian is never observed leaving the area. This absence is notable given the bar's location in a busy entertainment district. Friends and classmates reported that Brian did not leave with them. Scott Wiley, who had been with him earlier, recalled leaving the bar around 2:30 a.m., turning to check if Brian was following, but seeing no one matching his description. Wiley and others assumed he had left separately, but no one saw him exit through the front door. Brian's disappearance was reported the following day when he failed to appear for classes and did not respond to calls or messages. Initially, law enforcement considered the possibility of a voluntary disappearance, as he was an adult with the means to leave town. However, his personal belongings, including wallet, cell phone, and keys, were left in his apartment. There was no evidence suggesting he planned to leave or intended to sever contact with family and friends. Investigators treated the case as a potential abduction or foul play. Given the presence of multiple witnesses in the bar, as well as security cameras, Schaefer's disappearance presented an unusual challenge. It occurred in a public place with extensive visual documentation, yet no evidence indicated how or where he left. Ohio State University Police and the Columbus Division of Police conducted extensive interviews with bar staff, patrons, and friends. They also reviewed surveillance footage, including angles capturing doors, hallways, and nearby streets. Despite these efforts, no clear lead emerged. The nature of the bar itself contributed to the difficulty. The Ugly Tuna Saloon was known for a complex layout, including multiple hallways, restrooms, and an emergency exit door leading to a parking area. Investigators explored the possibility that Schaefer may have inadvertently or deliberately left through a back exit, but this was complicated by reports that all exits were accounted for, and no patrons or staff reported seeing him leave. Searches of the surrounding area, including dumpsters, storage rooms, and nearby alleys, yielded no evidence. Law enforcement also considered the possibility that Schaefer had fallen into a river or been removed from the vicinity by a third party, but there was no corroborating evidence for these scenarios. In the weeks following the disappearance, the case received extensive media coverage. Television news programs, newspapers, and online forums detailed the unusual circumstances, emphasizing the fact that Schaefer had effectively vanished in a heavily monitored public location. Law enforcement made multiple public appeals for information, requesting that anyone who had been at the bar that night come forward. Several unverified sightings were reported over the subsequent months, including potential appearances in other parts of Ohio and neighboring states. None of these sightings were substantiated. Investigators also explored whether Brian might have voluntarily disappeared due to personal issues, but interviews with family and friends indicated no known reasons for such an action. Those who knew him consistently described him as reliable, goal-oriented, and unlikely to voluntarily vanish without explanation. Over the years, advances in technology allowed for further analysis of available evidence. Investigators applied digital enhancement to the bar surveillance footage, but no new details were revealed. Law enforcement also conducted polygraph examinations with witnesses and reviewed phone records and financial activity. There was no evidence indicating that Brian had made arrangements to leave or that he had been in contact with anyone suspicious in the days leading up to his disappearance. As of the present day, Brian Schaefer remains missing. He is listed as an active missing person by the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation and the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. Law enforcement continues to monitor tips and leads, while periodically revisiting available evidence in the hope that advances in technology or new witness testimony may offer a breakthrough. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.